Hi, I'm Jean Schumacher, founder of the Plant-Based Academy, where I provide help, support, guidance, and resources to switch to a plant-based lifestyle and get your health back. Today, I have the privilege of connecting with Dr. Csilla Veress, who is a naturopathic primary care doctor at the True North Health Center. And she creates unique and powerful approaches to guiding her patients through balancing the mind, body, and spirit, which is the fundamental approach to total wellness that True North embraces. So thank you so much for taking the time to be with me here today.
Oh, thank you. I'm excited.
Yeah.
Definitely.
First, let's start off with an easy one. What is what exactly is the gut biome?
So the microbiome is what we understand now is our ecosystem. So we know at this juncture that we are more microbes than we are human cells. And the number is a little different depending upon the studies that you look at, but from anywhere from 3 to 1 to 10 to 1 microbes to human cells. So that means, just to give kind of context, if we have 37 trillion human cells, we can, a lot of times when you look at these studies, have up to 370 trillion microbes that are living within us. And those microbes consist of viruses. They are bacterium, different types of gram-positive, gram-negative bacterium. They are fungi. They can actually also be different types of parasites sometimes, and different types of, contexts, as we're actually looking at whether or not they are, in a lot of different situations, kind of a healthy addition throughout our lives or throughout different cultures' lives. So it's this collection of different microbes that add to this gorgeous ecosystem within us. So
What is the role of gut biome in overall health?
So we are now understanding that the microbiome, due to two main types of theories, I would say, or what we're looking at in research, is that it's hugely impactful, and it is probably what Hippocrates said is all disease starts in the gut, is probably much more true than we've ever realized, especially when he said it centuries and centuries ago. When I say there's two main theories, what I'm saying is that there's one that's called the barrier model. And to understand this, going a little bit deeper, is that when you think about the microbiome, the other question that people always ask is that, well, where is the microbiome then? Like, where is it located? If it's part of our ecosystem, where do we find it? And we actually can find the microbiome any surface area that lines to the outside world. So if you think about any area of your body that has this exposure to the outside world. So skin is very obvious, around the eyes, inside the inner ear canal, inside the nasal passages, the mouth, down the throat, small intestine, large intestine, urinary tract. So all of these areas, because they have that exposure, will have this microbiome layer. So when you understand that, one of the first primary kind of really main effects that the microbiome has is protection. So that's the barrier model, which is basically they're lining the surface. And so they're offering this beautiful, beautiful protection for us. And at one point in time, we thought that they were just standing still, and they were just kind of this physical type of protection. We now know, and this is the second kind of theoretical aspect of how they impact our health, is that not only do they have this physical barrier and very true physical protection, we now know that they communicate with the cells of our body, and it's every single cell of our body, and our cells can communicate back to the microbiome. So if you can imagine this, they have impact in our immune health. I always say this, it's like the tower control of an airport. If you can ever imagine the tower control going down on some of these major airports, that would be the microbiome being very disrupted in our immune system, which is why we're seeing huge increases in autoimmune and definitely immune dysfunction in our society. It has major impact in our mental health. It has major impact in our metabolic health, meaning diabetes, obesity, cholesterol, all of this, like lipids. So it has a huge impact in overall health of the body in every single system. So
Well, we
Yeah.
have a question for you. What are your
Okay.
thoughts about COVID, testing, vaccines, staying healthy? What are your thoughts going on?
So is the question, because we're talking about the microbiome, is the question much more related to what I think about those in connection with the microbiome and the research coming up, or just in general?
In general and for the microbiome.
Okay.
Let's go deep.
Okay. So I think one of the greatest pieces of research that I read lately, and I was actually floored. I mean, I love the microbiome, and I think that is probably central to person's health. But when I read this, because it was a pretty significant research study, they were saying that one of the primary predictors of COVID severity, so people that ended up with either long haul COVID that landed them in the hospital, or death from COVID, was the health of the microbiome, and was their health of the microbiome. I should say it that way. So to some people that understand the microbiome, it wasn't surprising. What was surprising to me is they actually published it and it was out there for everybody to see. We understood back during the time of COVID that, individuals that have chronic illness, cardiovascular disease, diabetes, obesity, were absolutely at a higher risk for not only contracting COVID long term, contracting COVID and having severe impact, but also dying of COVID. And so it is, I think, no surprise when we understand the impact of the microbiome in these disease states that those two would be then kind of tied together. We also now understand that, I mean, this is studies that a person who is obese is going to shed the virus for longer. We also know that our immune, like cytokines, are going to be affected when we don't have a robust microbiome. So we understand all of this aspects of how the microbiome can be connected to immune function, and thus, COVID is very much part of that, viral kind of, I would say, catalog of things that could affect us, right? This is how I feel about vaccinations in general. What I always do with my patients is I'm not against them and I'm not for them. I always look at a person, where they are in life, what they are looking to achieve, and also whether or not the risk versus the benefit is going to be appropriate for that person, or go through that at least with that patient. And the reason I say that is because this is just a flat line true statement. No matter what you do to your body, you put into your body, it's going to affect the health. So, the fact that people are like, vaccinations are so safe, and it's like, yeah, okay, comparative to, maybe surgery or something else that has a greater risk. Yes, vaccinations have maybe more safety behind them in certain cases, but there's still an injection that is stimulating your immune system that could absolutely have adverse reactions. So to say that everybody should just all of a sudden have a vaccination and it's not going to cause any issues, I think that actually it's malpractice, to be honest with you, and also it's a dangerous thing to say. And the reason I say that is because there's many people I've seen that have had adverse vaccination reactions, and this is across the board. This is not just with COVID. This is with various vaccinations. I've had people that have had Guillain-Barré syndrome after the swine flu vaccination. I've had, so my point with saying that is that they're not without risk. So when you go into a situation and you're trying to evaluate, is this vaccination something that is appropriate for me and that's going to help me move forward in my health? It's really important to understand who you are, like for me, I'm always evaluating what's my patient's microbiome like, what is their general health? Is this vaccination going to make a difference and is going to affect them positively or potentially negatively into the future? So that's how I go into it. I really, really evaluate case by case to really understand how people fall in that kind of spectrum. So
Here's something I often think about is like when you do go for, let's say, whatever vaccine, whether it's COVID or whatever, is it okay to get that vaccine if your immune system, you may have been compromised or you're not feeling well? Is this a good time to get? like say a COVID vaccine?
If you had a cold, let's say you had a flu or a cold, and you knew you were kind of and you knew that there was a party where you could then get whatever it is, right? Like you could get, chicken pox, you can get, other types. Would you ever even think about doing that? Most of us would say, probably not, because I already feel crappy or I just felt crappy. I do not want to set myself up for any more immune system kind of barrage, right? And so that's kind of the same idea when you think about vaccinations, because most of them, what the purpose of them is that they're going to stimulate something within your immune system that then hopefully the idea is that it's going to make you stronger to then, right, like kind of fight that same exact virus or organism later on in life, right? So I agree with you. I would say that a lot of times you can see a lot of issues if somebody's already walking into this like very, very sick or like almost like post-acute, so yeah.
What factors can influence the balance of the gut biome?
So there's actually a lot of things that can impact the microbiome. The major factors that go into the biodiversity of the microbiome or can really impact it. One is antibiotic use, not only whether or not somebody's been using antibiotic use recently. I usually take into account of how many rounds of antibiotic use in their entire life. And then a big one that we're finding out is actually how many antibiotic use they're using before the age of 3. One of the other things is medications. So I think everybody would probably agree. When you're taking a medication, everybody probably knows when you look at the list of ingredients, you're taking a chemical. So it's a synthetic kind of product that's produced in a laboratory and you're taking it. And hopefully it's going to produce the, detour effect or the effect that you want in the body. But with that chemical ingestion, it's going to affect the microbiome. There are some of those chemicals are going to affect the microbiome worse than others. So for instance, PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, histamine blockers, you have the NSAIDs, right? They're going to have much more of a greater impact on the microbiome than other medications. Birthing method, feeding methods going to impact the microbiome at early age. So whether or not somebody was vaginally born versus vaginally born versus C-section, breastfed versus formula fed. There is really beautiful new guidelines from the American College of OBGYN on those topics. They really recommend vaginal births. Yeah, exactly. Like they recommend vaginal birth. This is actually one of the first places we get seeding of our microbiome. We get a little bit with the placenta, but most of it is through that vaginal canal. So, we're looking into it because the C-section rates around the world are really increasing and they're very high, especially like in areas like Brazil, which is, up to like average 50% of births are C-section, but up to 70% in some areas. So we're really looking at that because we do see impact with the child's health throughout their life. Even the feeding methods, they now have really published 6 months to up to 2 years for breastfeeding. And actually, if you can't breastfeed, going to a milk bank to get another woman's milk first and then going to formula. So there is changes that is happening. Toxicant exposure is going to be huge, right? We are living in an increasingly toxic world. So that's going to have an impact. Foods are going to have a huge impact. I think everybody probably who's listening or hopefully who's even just finding this is going to be super excited to know that like plant-based foods throughout the research time and time and time again are the number one best thing you can do to bring back the biodiversity. Foods that are high in fat, processed, those ultra processed foods are so damaging to your microbiome and do change the composition of it. Any processed foods, this is even including soda, alcohol use, I always, people always ask me like, how bad really is alcohol? And I say, if you want to sterilize a surface, what do most people put on their alcohol, right? And so we're talking about different percentages, obviously, but like if we think about what we use that in our world today, that's what we're putting into our microbiome. Sanitation is actually another big one. I remember even time of COVID, like it was insane to me, like how many times, people are throwing these hand sanitizers at you. And yes, there's a time to be very sterile, right? And there's a time where, we should be washing our hands. The surgeon should wash their hands before they go into surgery. We should wash our hands after a toilet use, that kind of thing. But to be constantly throughout the day kind of hand sanitizing using antimicrobial soaps and cleaners that have like really kind of very dire impacts to our microbiome. We are now finding that they have a huge, huge impact on not only our immune health, but our microbiome health. So
My children were born, I was living in Bogota, Colombia, and the C-section rate there was about 70-75%. I was horrified,
yeah,
horrified. And they
yeah,
did have literally 2 blocks from my house was a place which dealt with, holistic childbirth. And I
yeah,
actually gave birth in the water, which was amazing.
that
And
is cool.
it was. I mean, he was so far ahead of his time, but unbelievable. Oh my gosh.
So in some areas, like I know when I studied some of the research in Brazil, they have in some areas they have really limited access to healthcare. So some of the time, like C-sections were almost necessary so that they could access like proper support if God forbid there was an emergency type of situation. And then, there's always that argument too. It's like, gosh, before C-sections, like how many people were, born naturally. So, but just so you know, like, yes, many places were actually scheduling them because they can be scheduled. There's not late night callings, like things like that. So it's much more convenient. But in some areas too, it's due to lack of healthcare as well. So
Yeah, well, not where I was. It was just because of convenience. I want to
yeah,
schedule to have my baby. And it's like,
yeah,
no, let
and
nature
that does happen. Yeah.
nature do that. So the other one is toxins and just personal care products that were I mean there's so many over since World War II over 10,000 chemicals, and this is my area of expertise with environmental science. I'm a former chemistry teacher, and this is something I've been studying for like 25 years, and the amount of toxins, literally anything on your skin in 26 seconds is in your bloodstream, and it
Mhm.
is phenomenal how much it has an impact on you. There's so many endocrine disruptors that your body, I mean, your whole body is one big endocrine system. I mean, everything is running on hormones. You need to find products that are non-toxic because, and I think back to this, I was an elementary principal for a while, and I remember they would send home these lists of, in the beginning of the school year, send your kid in with, this whole list of stuff. And they would ask for like 6 or 7 bottles of hand sanitizer. And I get it, to like line up 26 kids in first grade and to get them to wash their hands before they go to lunch. Yeah, no, that's lunch right there. They're not going to have time to eat. So I get it. So the teacher would line them up and go and squirt down the whole line and would do this several times a day because of the kid, because this kid has a cold and is coughing, on everybody and wiping their nose and whatever. And then the Clorox sanitizer sheets would go on the
Yeah.
desk every day. What did we do to
Yeah.
their gut biome? I just
Yeah.
think back to this now that I have a lot more insight into these environmental toxins.
We've gotten to a place where I think there's almost too much of a, uh, for lack of a better word, maybe fear with like germs are bad. Germs, I mean, like we don't want to be exposed to anything. And it's like, when you look at the research, there's super, super sound research. One of the most powerful ways we build not only our immune system, but our microbiome is exposure. Like, I mean, it's exposing ourselves to it. And they've looked at that. They've looked at kids that grew up in urbanized areas versus like out in nature where they're exposed to like the soil, the microbes, the bugs, the things that we're trying to hyper clean all the time, right? They're the ones taking out the trash. They're not afraid to get their hands a little bit dirty. Like they're exposing themselves to like animals. Which animals, as we all know, they're the ones that are sniffing other poops, and and the thing is that we think of this and we're like, oh, that's so gross, or that's not what we want. But actually, that is the thing that exposes us to the myriad of microbes that then offer the robustness. So actually, this is why in the olden days, I mean, I think people think it's archaic, but actually it's also a little bit brilliant. Like mothers would actually get kids together and be like, let's all just get sick together. Like, I mean, like they're gonna get sick anyway, so let's just get sick together, because then they start to build this immune function. They start to build their microbiome. And I know in today's world, people are like, what? Like, that's crazy. But it's like, it's actually more intelligent than what we're doing right now with our hand sanitizer. And we're learning the lesson. I mean, this is literally across the board. We're understanding we are becoming too sanitized as a society in the wrong ways. Like I said, there is a time and place to be sterile, but there is many, many times, like in a school system with these beautiful kids that have these robust, like kind of immune systems, like that's where you're going to get exposure and kind of keep building this. So
No, I hear you. But it sounds like it's a catch 22 then. So how do you clean?
there's many, many beautiful, like natural products that will quote unquote clean to the level of what's necessary in order to, you know, whatever you want to call it, like protect you, right? I mean, so if you look at, I mean, there's a myriad of sites that you can look at, which they show like baking soda, vinegar, there's a great app. It's called, I mean, you mentioned this too. I mean, there's a lot of beautiful companies that are doing great cleaning products that are doing them naturally. I use an app on my phone. It's called Yuka, Yuka. I just found it very recently. I love it. I have so much fun. I always tell patients, I'm like, don't think of it as a chore. Think of it as how fun this is. And you go and it has a scanner for the barcode, and you can scan different things in your household just to find out. Or I take it to grocery stores and I say, is this thing I can use in my home? And so there's many, many different ways to clean. And if we're thinking about just using soap is so powerful. And actually, what they are finding is that if we're just even talking, let's go back to COVID. One of the most powerful ways you're going to actually prevent the spread of COVID, if it's in the is to like wash your hands with soap. Like many times you're using these antibacterial lotions, they're not working with the viruses. So like, I mean, this is what I'm saying is like, there's so much kind of fluff that's being put out there where when you dial it in and you actually look at the research, it's saying something very different, and that is what's scary. This is why I feel like people or doctors that were on the forefront of being like, hey, people, wake up. Like there's something wrong with the way that this is being, number one, televised, like promoted out there, like this fear factor. Like let's kind of calm down and like understand what this is and how do we deal with it. Like let's get out into nature. Actually, let's get out into fresh air. Let's actually like do the things that are going to boost our immune system. So the reason I say that is because it's super difficult, I think, when there is one, agenda that's always constantly being pushed out there, to start to wrap your mind around the fact that it's like, oh, this might not be true, or there might be a different way to look at it. So
Going back to the hand sanitizer, there's a chemical called triclosan, which is banned.
absolutely,
It's supposed to be banned. Hello, and it's still there, And
for sure. Yeah, and we know that it's a major microbiome disruptor. Yeah, absolutely.
and it's so sad. And it's just so sad. And it makes me crazy, that this
Yeah.
is still there, because there is absolutely no regulation on these personal care products. None, zero. Europe has very different standards. They call it, you have to prove that it's not going to hurt somebody before you can set it out there in the world to sell, or, whatever. You have to prove it. It's called the precautionary principle.
There's still an enormous amount of chemicals that are still being used in the United States today. Pesticides, herbicides, different types of chemicals that we're putting in our food sources, specifically specifically targeted for our children, right? For our children, like the cereals, like the snack foods, things like that have been banned in over 30 countries, specifically in Europe. Yet we still allow it into the days well. But here's the benefit, is that we have beautiful spokespeople right now. These people are actually on the Senate, like in front of them, saying like, this is preposterous. Like, why are we poisoning, right? Number one, our our United States citizens, when we know how dangerous, that we know how dangerous they are, that other countries, right, are actually banning these different products, but yet we still allow them in the United States today. And these people are in the front lines and they're really speaking. I mean, what you and I speak, in terms of whole food, plant-based, but they're bringing it to a different level because they're saying, let's affect these big name brands like Kellogg's and say this is not correct. Like, you need to get these chemicals out of your products because, again, Robert Kennedy Jr. said this, and I agree with him so much, is that if you start getting kids sick, that is one of the major money makers you can ever have, because if a child is sick, then they're sick pretty much probably throughout their entire life. And that's what's disgusting about that, right? It's like, this is why I get so heated and so excited about what's coming up, because these people are really making, they're stirring things up in the world of not only the pharmaceutical industry, but also these big name companies. So,
Well,
yeah.
and it makes me crazy because, like, going back to this regulation, like, for example, they could put a PEGs, PEGs, in with a sodium lauryl sulfate. Now, in that process, it will combine and create a chemical called 1,4-dioxane, which
Yep.
is so toxic to the environment, so toxic that they measure it in not parts per million, parts per billion.
Yeah.
And they do not have to say that there's 1,4-dioxane in it because they did not put that in there.
Yeah.
What?
Yeah.
My
Yeah.
head explodes. My head
Yeah.
just explodes.
Yeah. Well, and I welcome anybody, because if you're excited about this conversation as much as we are, like, if you start down, like, just understanding even like those different components, like, you would be, I mean, it's unbelievable what's being put in our food. It
I,
really is. Like, it's unbelievable that that it's legal,
I
so
know. Like glyphosate to spray on foods to help them dry out.
yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
It's killing our gut biome. I mean, anyway, sorry.
Well, not only is it killing our gut biome, like, so here's the other thing. It is destroying our gut biome, but what I think we're not really understanding too is that when we use these chemicals, and so this is the greater part of the ecosystem as a world, what we're doing is we're actually depleting nutrients in the soil. And so when we deplete that, we're actually depleting not only our own microbiome, we're depleting where we get the diversity. Because when people ask me, people always say, well, why do plants offer us increased biodiversity within our microbiome? And if you think about it, where would we get additional microbes but with the food that we're eating, right? Like, I mean, the beautiful plants have their own microbiome. And so we're actually, just like when we play with pets, they have their own microbiome and we're kind of exchanging that. They've even shown who you hang out with will affect your microbiome, because we're interspecies kind of type, or we're very interconnected through species connection. And so thing is that when we're using these chemicals, yes, it's impacting us directly. And then what's happening is we're actually impacting our future generations. Like, I mean, there is studies that are showing that our world is not going to be able to last even 50 years if we continue on this trajectory of like destroying our soil, because the idea is like, where are we going to plant this? Where is there going to be soil that's going to be nutritionally like rich enough to do that, So it's a bigger conversation than I think that most people realize when we really dig down deep into it. So
What are the potential signs of an unhealthy gut biome?
the signs of an unhealthy gut microbiome or dysbiosis, which is an imbalance in the microbes of the microbiome, it can really be pretty much in any system. Typically, what people I think associate with were like bloating, really odorous gases, changes in stool to constipation, diarrhea, abdominal pain. But actually, there's been a lot of conditions that have been associated with it. So depression, anxiety, brain fog, eczema, acne is one of the number. It is heartbreaking how many people I see in my practice that have had, acne in their teenage years or in their 20s or now in their 40s, and the first line of defense is antibiotics with most dermatologists. And unfortunately, what you're doing is you're depleting, destroying, or imbalancing, or causing imbalance within the microbiome, where if we were to rebalance the microbiome at the start of it, when that person was, starting to have that acne, you actually will see impacts, throughout their entire life. And that's really what they need. They don't need to be destroying it even more. So, so it can be anything like joint pain, irritable bowel disease, irritable bowel syndrome, different types of cancers as well, not only just within the colon, but also breast cancer. We know it has major enzymatic processes that depend upon how we get rid of extra estrogen in our system through the microbiome. So it can be, I guess my point is it can be, top to bottom, many different types of symptoms can come up from that. So
one of the things is the popular uses of things like probiotics is to help replenish the gut biome after a course of, say, antibiotics. The logic being the antibiotics, that's like throwing a grenade into the gut biome. It kills everything, the good, the bad, the ugly. There's solid evidence suggesting probiotics actually work if taken this way.
So here's the thing, there is actually research that has been shown to prove the fact that when you take quality probiotics, in many cases prescription probiotics that we know are live strains, they're the strains that are very specific to what we're trying to treat, not just taking a probiotic off the shelf of Costco and just hoping that it's going to work, or Walgreens or CVS or any other kind of store where we know, because they've done studies, that number one, you don't even know what you're getting. You might not even be getting probiotics. They're full of fillers. And so the reason they're so cheap, which is why I always say, do not get I like Costco for a lot of different reasons, especially if you're trying to raise families and stuff, but for supplements and for that sort of type of support, I do not love them, because one of the reasons why some of those products are so cheap is because they have a lot of extra fillers. They don't have the necessary materials in them. So quality does matter. The specific strain does matter. If you are giving those, we do actually see benefits to it. And then of course, when you look at lifestyle and diet, those have to be in place with it. You won't, with anything. I mean, this is anything across the board. You will never get the most impact post, kind of GI infection or whatever you're using the antibiotic for, if you're not looking at what is their diet like? Are they sleeping? Are they exercising? How is their stress level? So, and because the reason I say that is because even with fecal transplants, what they have found is they're massively impactful. But then if you actually then do a fecal transplant on somebody and it's effective, but then they go back and eating processed crap, high meat, high fat diets, over time, it's going to revert back. And that's it shouldn't be a surprise to many people, right? So the same thing with antibiotic use is that you can see positive impact, especially when you're educating people on here's the really importance of plant-based diets, because they've done studies and they've shown that the number one best way you're going to be rebuilding that biodiversity, I agree, is not going to be taking just probiotics. It's going to be eating high plants, making sure you're looking at your lifestyle. And then, yeah, probiotics can be a major impact in health on that. So,
do you have a place you recommend to get probiotics, good ones?
like I said, there's prescription ones if somebody really needs it. So that's something you can ask your doctor for. I do set up a full script account for my patients only because they get, not only 20% off, but also it's a beautiful site that has, triple tested products where companies are saying, okay, I know that supplements are not FDA approved, because of that, of the impact that they can have. And so what they do is themselves, they will test their products, which I think is amazing when companies will do that. Because what they want to do is they actually want, I think of it this way, is they want physicians to recommend these products because they know that they're really good quality, so I use that. I don't think that it's accessible for patients unless you have oh, doctor you're working with. Emerson Ecologics are the same thing, but again, I don't think it's a site that people can just access. So I would talk to your doctor. Most doctors can also have good recommendations for that.
I had to finally break down and go through a primary care physician, and we just did blood work, for my initial meeting and physical exam. And I said, well, I'd like to have my C-reactive protein. I'd like to have my TMAO measure because I haven't had it done for a while. And she just looked at me like, TMAO? I'm sorry, I don't know what that is. And I can't order a test if I don't know what it is. And I'm like, were you absent? Google it.
Yeah.
No, and just things and it's hard because the doctors are not trained. They're not trained in nutrition. They're not trained to understand what's going on within the human body. I mean, they're not. They're trained on the use of pills and how to prescribe them. And I'm not saying that pills are not necessary or helpful, but it's not meant for long term. It's not meant to heal our body.
Mhm.
As and I just got to put out there, as the historian for the National Health Association, I've been researching this and finding out, and back into the 1700s we knew this. We started to learn this message that drugs are not the way to go. Your body can basically heal itself on so many levels, and they've been knowing this for a long time. Got my research all on the NHA website. Just want to share that.
Yeah.
We've known this for so long, but so
Yep.
what are ways that we can improve our health, the health of our gut biome?
It depends also on where a person's coming from with their health. So, what you're going to need is going to depend upon, like I said, the different risk factors. Like, have you had medication used? Like, what was your childhood growing up? Was there a lot of stress? Like, were you sick a lot? Did you have multiple medications throughout your life? Did you ever go on hormone therapy, over the counter birth control? Like, so it kind of depends on where a person's coming from and what we're trying to treat. But in general, the things that are going to be the most impactful is number one, I said it. I mean, even studies that try to incorporate meat as an okay addition will always, always, always say the number one thing you need to do to rebalance your microbiome is plants. So, and there is always going to be out there. Like, so, just bringing that to the surface, you're going to have studies out there that are really going to try to incorporate meat into their study to say, and actually it makes me really I have to laugh because there was a couple studies that I saw and they worded it different, but basically what they were saying is that, yep, what we found is that processed meats are so damaging because they're carcinogenic and we know this. But what we found was that even though meat products do cause these chemicals with the fermentation within the microbiome, that they're not so great. They're not as bad as the processed meats. So eating them in moderate amounts is going to be just fine. In some way, shape, or I know some way, shape, or form, that's how they word it, and that's how they can word it is like, in moderate amounts, we don't think that there's anything problematic, even though they're producing these chemicals and high fat and meat, diets are causing dysbiosis. But it's really like plants are really awesome, but you can have a little bit of meat. So anyway, my point is plant-based diet, and obviously exclusively plant-based diets are going to be the most beneficial for rebalancing microbiome. And I think it's exciting too when you see doctors that are studying more of the microbiome. Like most of them, even if they are kind of like omnivore-ish, they're going to like always push more and more and more vegetables, which I think is just very much tall telling of like how important this is. Stress reduction is huge. So I think that a lot of people don't understand the impact that stress can have, not only directly on your body for inflammatory processes, but also how that then impacts the microbiome, but also stress directly impacts and changes the balance of the microbiome. Sleep has been shown to be super positive. Getting out into nature is probably the second best thing you can possibly do. Because again, the more dirty you're getting and you're gardening and you're getting one with nature. One of the things I talked about in the NHA conference too is that when you study around the world, when you're looking at different cultures and we're trying to assess like how do we create healthy microbiomes, what we found was that in northern Tanzania, there's the Hutsa tribe, and the Hutsa tribe is a tribe that is so connected to their ancestral type of upbringing, meaning like they really are connected to the earth. They're living very similar to the way that they've lived, for hundreds and hundreds and probably thousands of years. And they have virtually no diabetes, no obesity, no cardiovascular disease, no cancer. Like they don't have modern diseases, and they have the most like biodiverse microbiome that we've studied throughout the entire world, and they are living like with the land, like the most that we've seen. So nature is hugely impactful. And then fasting, believe it or not, has been shown to be super positive in boosting biome diversity. It's been super positive with helping to heal inflammation. There are things like endotoxemia, like increased intestinal permeability, things like that. I mean, fasting has been shown to be very positive if we're trying to heal the gut. So
I just got to have a shout out to True North because they've been doing the fasting and teaching other doctors how to fast. They've got generations of people that are going on to do fasting from True North. I think with fasting itself, you really need to do this annually, just to clean out under the hood. I mean,
yeah.
think about that. Think about that. Our bodies, we don't like change it. We don't change the oil in, we change the oil in our car, but we don't like change the oil in our body,
Right.
like the bloodstream or whatever. I mean, it's constantly being monitored, but we're dealing with so many environmental toxins that are having an impact on us. And that's one way that we can get rid of that stuff and dump it.
Yeah.
And yeah,
Yeah.
it's a good thing. I mean,
Yeah.
fasting a couple times a year, but going to True North is a way to, it's kind of like like a health vacation. You're literally causing yourself to stop, slow down, rest. Like literally, because like when we have vacations, it's like, oh yeah, let's go to Disney. Yeah, we walk 13 miles a day. Yeah, no, that's not rest. You come home worse than when you left for the vacation. This is like a health vacation that you can go and heal your body on so many levels. Fasting is amazing. It's truly.
And I think this year I've seen this more than I ever have, and I think it's such a beautiful thing. But and I don't know if it's just a coincidence or what it is, but in this past year I've seen, gosh, I want to say at least 20 to 30 of my patients have come in and said, "This is my birthday present to myself, is to be here to fast." And I was like, that's amazing. Like what better gift can you give to yourself than health? Like there is nothing. I mean, there's, health is wealth, right? So like you can have all the money in the world, but I mean, if you don't have your health, like it doesn't even matter if you even have a dollar, right? And so I just thought that was beautiful. And I mean, throughout the years scattered, people will be like, "Oh, I'm here for my birthday." This year I've seen a lot of people come in just as their birthday gift to themselves. And I was like, kudos to you. That's awesome. Yeah. Yeah.
That is a great gift
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
your health is worth working for.
For sure. For
I
sure.
mean,
Yeah.
and to put it into other people's hands. I'm sorry, you have to take ownership of what you're doing. You
Oh,
have to.
absolutely.
You have to learn. Mental health is huge and it's on the rock
Hmm.
on so many problems. What impact does the gut biome have on mental health?
Oh, so I would say this next to metabolic syndrome, meaning obesity, hypercholesterolemia, diabetes, the next layer, I would say, of research that's just astounding for the microbiome connection is to mental health. So we know that, one of the major players is serotonin, which we understand as that like a feel good hormone. Most of that is produced in the gut, and it's very dependent upon our microbiome health. Not only that, but GABA. A lot of different neurotransmitters have their major balance through gut kind of communication through the vagus nerve up to the brain. So it's hugely impactful. And actually we see so much benefit at True North with different people coming in for depression or anxiety or even OCD or, different types of mental health components that not only just with fasting, but even just eating a healthier diet has major impact. And like I said, we already know the impact of eating more plants towards the microbiome health. So obviously there's that other layer that's going to help with mental health. So yeah.
What are the best foods for promoting a healthy gut biome? I mean, yes, we get it, plants but within plants, is there some better than others?
When you look at the research, you're going to see that the more variety that you're eating, the healthier the microbiome is. So there are definitely some plants that are maybe higher in these beautiful, like prebiotic fibers. So, like, for instance, asparagus, onions, garlic, radishes, Jerusalem artichokes. So the reason I don't always love to like bring those to the attention because I feel like people are a lot of times want to be like, okay, this is a superfood, so I'm just going to eat that. Or, like we hear about it all the time. It's like, I eat blueberries every single day, all day long. And it's like, that's great. And it's not that I'm not telling you not to eat blueberries, but what would be even better is maybe if you change it up and have a different berry every single day. And that's what research does show is that actually the more variety you're bringing in, the healthier your microbiome. So yes, this does mean that individuals that are plant-based, but let's say you're eating brown rice and broccoli and, whatever it is, asparagus every single day, you're plant-based, and that's step one. The second step is we need to get more, different plant choices in your diet in order to boost the health of your gut. So
Is there any supplements that can help improve the gut biome?
there are many different supplements that can be used in scenarios that deal with inflammation, dysbiosis, increased intestinal permeability, a lot of the different quote unquote like disease states that we see with microbiome imbalances. There's no one supplement that's going to be just beneficial across the board. I have found in my practice that I find it really important to not only listen to a person's history, but also really understand the presentation of what they're coming into the office with. And then also I do tests because I want to know, are we dealing with dysbiosis? What type of dysbiosis are we dealing with? Where, like, is there increased intestinal permeability? What else? What are the other factors we need to treat? Like, are there certain inflammatory markers that point to there's a greater sense of allergies or intolerances in the system? Like, are we looking at changing up food choices? So that's how I use, my clinical evaluation and kind of bring in supplements that I find could be helpful. It's not like my primary choice to go just to supplements alone. Although I will say, if there is a dysbiotic or dysbiosis happening within a patient, sometimes, using the right, probiotics in addition to changing diet or helping a person with their diet could be so impactful. Or, if somebody does have increased intestinal permeability and they've been doing plant-based and they've been doing probiotics and it hasn't helped, that's where supplements that can kind of start to heal that gut lining can come into play. So it depends. And there's many different ones. There's like L-glutamine, quercetin, algae oil, or different types of SAMe, silymarin, which is milk thistle. So there's a ton of different supplements that I've used in combination depending upon the person that's in front of me. But there's not, I wouldn't say there's one that if somebody's like, I feel like I have something going on with my microbiome, there's not one that I would just say, here, go ahead, just take that. So
Well, again, it's getting to the root cause of whatever
right.
the person is dealing with. So I think that's the biggest issue, and I think that's something that people really need to understand is if you're going to heal yourself, you have to get to the root cause of what is causing you to not feel well. Are there any lifestyle changes that can help improve the gut biome or the
Oh
gut?
yeah. Oh yeah, for sure. I mean, anything you're doing to the foundations of health. So my foundations of health are, like we talked about, diet, so changing up diet to be more plant-based and also more variety of foods. Sleeping, making sure you're sleeping 7 to 9 hours, trying to sleep through the night. If you're not, again, evaluating what's causing you to be awake, what's causing you not to sleep. Stress resilience. So this is not, I'm fully aware of the fact that it is absolutely impossible to get stress out of your life totally. It's about, do you have the tools that you need? Do you need maybe some additional support with, here's where herbs can come into play, to help like just support the adrenals. Do you need to be spending more time, in nature with different types of stress kind of management activities? The other thing is, exercise has been shown to be super positive. So again, also with exercise, I just always throw in there, it's not about overdoing it. It's just about, are you moving your body and are you moving it on a daily basis? And then obviously getting out into nature. Things like, are you happy? Like, are you finding, and I know it's a double-edged sword because some people can say, well, my microbiome's not happy, so that's why I'm not happy. But also, are you doing the supportive activities that are going to keep that, trajectory forward with health as you're kind of working on the microbiome? So it can also be a double-edged sword in the positive. Like, for instance, are you, meditating, praying every day? Are you walking every day? Like things, are you getting out and getting a little bit of sun every day? Are you talking to people? Are you journaling? Things like that. And then community is really huge too. So it's part of our connection to each other. And that's vital. That's really vital. Even in introverts, I get the question a lot, was like, well, I'm an introvert. I don't really want to be around people. And it's like, with introverts, the point is that you might not want to be around like a lot of different people, but connecting to the people that or connecting to people on a daily basis is still important. It's definitely, you can recharge by yourself, but getting out there and just kind of interacting with like your people, is still a positive, like, community building type of activity. So yeah.
I have to say a lot about the community because I think it's one of the most difficult things when you go plant-based, because when I started this, I had no community. And
Yeah.
so there was no one to turn to. There was no one to ask questions because, oh my God, there's a lot to learn. There is so much to learn. And I think having that community around you is huge. And, here on Cape Cod, it's called Plant-Based Cape Cod. And we meet, we do potlucks. We've got somebody coming in,
Awesome.
speaker coming in to do, she just wrote a cookbook. And so she's coming in to share her cookbook. And, we'll meet up at the local cinema. And we showed Code Blue. We showed Disease Reversal Hope and things like that at the movie theaters to
Hmm.
help people understand that you have a lot more control over your health than
Hmm.
you ever knew about. So, and then I just want to end up with, I think being here on Cape Cod, this is just such a magical place, honestly. I can't say enough about it. And I love going out into the woods. I live right next to the state park, and I can go out and be, even in the height of tourist season, I can dive into the woods and not see another person. And
Mm.
360 degrees surrounding me is woods.
Yeah.
And I feel so much at peace. We take 10 minutes, and in our walk that we're going through, we find a nice place. We sit down and just be. And for my husband, that's hard because he is
Yeah.
like on hyperdrive. But to just be and quiet our mind, quiet ourselves, listen to the woods, listen to the forest. Oh, I come out of there with such a sense of peace. I mean,
Yeah.
it's incredible. The other thing I did is on my YouTube channel, my husband and I, it was October of last year. It was one of these perfect days in October. It was like 85 degrees. I went around and recorded like the beaches because there was nobody there, because you're not
That's
expecting
great.
an 85-degree day in
Yeah.
October. So I went around recording a bunch of the different beaches and the different types of surf and wind and rain and, fire and, just 10-minute meditations. So you can find those on my YouTube channel.
That's
So
awesome.
anyway, Dr. Varesh, thank you so much for taking the time today.
Yeah.
This is an amazing conversation. You are just such a plethora of information. So
Yeah.
thank you so much. I'm very
Thank
grateful.
you for having me, for sure. I love talking about this. So as you can tell, I love spreading the knowledge in the world just so people can have information so that they can make decisions for themselves, right? Like, so.
Exactly. Yeah. Your health is worth working for, and I can't say that enough. And
yeah.
if you find your health not at where it should be, start out at True North with Dr. Veress. She's incredible, just saying. So thank you.
Thank you.